Hey everyone, it's Istebrak. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint anime realistically. I know I always talk about how to avoid your anime influence from, distorting the way you draw realistically, overdrawing eyes, making them too large, always drawing the elf face. But today I'm going to show you how to keep the anime proportions but make them look realistic. And that's a really popular thing nowadays with a lot of artists. They want to keep the anime proportions, that cutesy character kind of Lolita thing going on, but also bring in some realistic aspects like realistic lighting, dramatic lighting, bringing in all kinds of physics into the image to bring the image to life. So I'm going to be showing you some of those. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a lesson on shading. It's always the stuff that I say in my other videos. If I do skip over something, most surely I have talked about it thoroughly in another video. Alright, so let's begin. I am going to just what I did today was actually I just went into Google and I searched up um, anime line art, and this popped up. It's by wowawero.deviantart.com. I'll link it in the video. This is just for instructional purpose. I just need to have some line art to draw over. I don't do anime that regularly. I do have some on my Instagram, but I don't really anime is not really my forte. But I do want to show you guys how to keep these anime proportions, these exact proportions that we see in front of us, um, with some realistic stuff. So this is by wowawero.deviantart.com. Thank you for letting me use it. I know I didn't ask you, but I'm thanking you in advance because I will link you this video after I'm done. But yeah, this is Wawero's line art. I will link it. Anyways, let's begin. The first thing that you're supposed to do is, what am I doing? Is make the background not white, because God, that's glaring. That's just blinding me. Ugh. It's really important to keep your values low. The reason why that is important is because you do not want to deviate away from, the more neutral colors too much, because you will always have this sort of addiction to the high colors or the light colors. If you have a white pulls all the colors up in value if it's being compared to them. So if the background is white, flooding your image with that white wash, then it will change the way you choose your colors. If you choose a medium tone, all the colors that you choose will not be influenced by a deep white or a deep black. So it's really important to remember to keep your background gray for that reason, and for the reason that we want to be able to see when we're 50 and 60. So it's good for your eyes as well. You don't want to be staring at that screen. And we sit there for hours, you guys. We sit there for hours when we paint. So please remember that you're not having a white background there, because you're not noticing it, but you're damaging your eyes. So there's that. All right. So a couple of rules before I start. The first rule about shading. If you're new to shading and you're just starting out with anime and you just started drawing anime and you look at your influences and you're like, wow, those guys draw so good and they paint them so good. How do they do that? A lot of those popular artists today, they just basically have anime proportions and they just paint so realistically over them. They get rid of the lines, and they have this amazing feeling of realism in the image. Well, there are three main rules that you have to remember in order to make sure your anime drawing turns into a realistic painting. The first rule is the fact that we are changing something that is two-dimensional, so X and Y, into something that is three-dimensional, Z. We bring in the factor of Z. Z is the cube. So if I were to create a little dot dot, wait, that's not working. I will just do a straight line. If I were to make a little indication of another side of that cube, then we have the cube. It's really difficult to make a cube in a 2D medium like a paper, to draw a cube without having that z-axis involved. So yeah, now we have a cube. What do we do with the cube? Painting realistically requires your awareness of the third dimension. And that means that you're thinking about an open space. You're thinking about the fact that your canvas, this is your canvas, right? This is what you opened up on Photoshop. Your canvas is actually three-dimensional. It's got space in it. It's got open space that your character can exist in. And when we paint something realistically, let's say we have a cube inside this open space, and that's your anime character right there. But all you have are the lines of the cube. Okay, so this is just the lines. We have to make this cube come to life without the lines. How do we do that? How do I make something realistic and get rid of the lines? Some of you are addicted to your lines. Some of you can't let go of your lines because you're like, okay, when I erase the lines and I get rid of the line layer and I have like a layer of color underneath, it's just not working. I just don't see I don't see any of my drawing anymore. And that's because you're addicted to your lines, because your lines are the only way you've determined any form. You are missing something called form in your life, and form is present when we have a light source. So this is a shiny light source shining on this cube. So this cube here starts to have some shadows on it. And after we have enough shadows and shades, we realize, hey, I don't need these lines anymore because look what's happening. I can just not blend these shades or blend them where they need to be blended, and I will have my object. So let me get another shade up here, and you'll see these lines become a very specific word, which is obsolete. They become no longer useful. They are pointless sort of for the purpose that we're dealing with here, which is identifying form. So look, I'm not blending where the lines were. And I know this is like duh moment for some of you, but this is a serious part of this. Yeah, it's simple, but some of you don't really think like this, and you need to start thinking like this if you want to bring things to life in your drawings. I'm literally just getting rid of the lines and replacing them with shades with the help of a light source. So I made a line into a cube, a line drawing into a cube drawing. Whoopsie, select inverse. What does that mean? That means that I have identified the form with lighting without the use of lines. A line, so what is a line? A line is a stamp. A line is a silhouette of the form. A line is not the form. A line is a pointer to the form. It is not real. Nothing in real life walks around without lines in it. So if you want to paint an anime character that looks realistic, realize that you're going to have to get rid of the lines. And if you get rid of the lines, you will have to start bringing in some shades. So you have to treat the anime head and the hair as a 3D object. So you have to think about them as if you modeled them on a 3D modeling program. And after you modeled them, you have like an actual 3D shape. So you realize that in 3D modeling, it's impossible to model in 3D modeling if you don't have a light source by you, representing the sides and the upward areas and the downward areas of a model, and like a cube or whatever. And you notice that in 3D modeling, you have both the X and Y and Z lines of motion that you can move your object through. So if we're thinking about making something realistic that was once 2D, we're basically saying we're going to make it 3D. And the way you make something three-dimensional is, first of all, you have to start thinking about the three-dimensional. So think about the fact that there's a z-axis. And then think about, sorry, I have a cold. And think about the fact that that you're going to have to bring in a light source. So these aren't the rules I was talking about. So basically, this is the summary of it. When we have a 3D object, it has contour colors, contour shades in it. So it's got a light, medium, a dark, medium, and a light. Okay, so it's obvious now that after we get our light source, we cannot represent the form and replace the lines properly if we don't have these shades. Because look, if I just reselect, let me find that lasso again. Select inverse, and select inverse again. If I don't have any previous lines to tell me where I want to place these shades, and I just use one shade, this is a flat object. This is not a real object. So what is this object? It's just too flat. There's nothing happening to it. It's as soon as we start placing in some shades with thinking about the presence of a light source, while thinking about the presence of a light source, we start to see a realistic shape emerge. So one more time I'm demonstrating this. Okay. So as soon as we start bringing in some variation of shades, we start seeing a three-dimensional object. And these shades, where they don't blend, that's where the lines used to be. So please remember that. So now we see that we need shades. What else do we need to make a three-dimensional object exist in an open space. So this is your canvas again, and you're trying to make this canvas represent a three-dimensional space. So how do you do that if you're not casting shadows? When this light exists over here, it means that it's throwing off and projecting millions and billions and trillions and innumerable, uncountable, I don't even know if that's the word, amount of light rays. So actual vectors, actual lines that continue to fly and they never stop for eternity. That's just how light is, or at least as far as I know. So if these lines are traveling and they carry light with them and they illuminate objects with them, they will illuminate things that are exposed to them. But they won't be able to reach objects that are not exposed to them. So what happens is those objects, being dense, stand in the way of the light. So this object here is a hard cube. It's made out of concrete. So it's going to cast a shadow along the side of this wall. Maybe a little bit to the side here, but I have no space. So just for the sake of the demonstration, I'm just going to do this. So it's casting a shadow because the light is in the way. The light would actually be somewhere here. Because this object is dense, so these light rays travel and touch these areas here that are exposed, the front faces, so the front face I call them, or the exposed space of the cube. But look, light doesn't do this. It doesn't wrap. It doesn't bend. Only if there's a black hole, but that's another story. So this unexposed area turns into what we call a cast shadow. It has been cast upon the wall, just like this. So contours, cast shadow, and the fact that lines are not the real thing. They are a projection of the thing. They are not the actual shadows and shades. They don't represent any shadows or shades. After you bring in the shadows, shades, and highlights, they become obsolete and useless. Alright, so let's jump in and actually color this girl. So I've done a lot of skin tutorials, so I'm going to rush through the skin tones. I'm not going to go around explaining every single thing about the color theory because I have videos on that, videos upon videos on that. So I will rush through. I'm going to choose a base tone for the skin. So I'm just organizing here. I'm just preparing. I am not doing anything that has to do with rendering or blending just yet. I'm not thinking about any of that. So I'm just going to choose a skin tone that sort of represents a nice medium flesh tone, kind of Caucasian, with a bit of blood in it, kind of on the high side. And I'm going to use that for the base tone of the skin. I'm going to get a yellow influenced beige, so I'm going to stay where I am when I chose this color. I'm going to move up in the slider, and then I'm going to move up in the color picker, and then choose a base tone. A light tone that is influenced by yellow but still has the peaches in it. And then finally, I'm going to move down into red, because red has purples in it. It's cooler. You see, it's kind of turning into a purple compared to where it was before. And I'm going to move it down on the slider for the shadow color. It's a bit saturated, so I might want to also move it down into the desaturated area. But I'm going to keep that color because I kind of like it. Maybe I'll use it for under shadow blush. I'm going to use the under light blush, which is sort of like a blush color that sits in between highlights and the base tone. I've already talked about this before. And then I'm going to choose a super dark color, areas that are directly unexposed, also influenced by red, which has purples in it. And I'm going to use that as the shadow. Maybe actually, again, desaturating just a little. Okay, so this is my skin tone palette. I'm going to use this to sort of lay down some basic shades. And remember these rules here. Remember that you need a 3D object exposed to the light, so you need the light source. So yeah, start thinking about where your light source is in your canvas. If you don't, it's not going to work, period. Think about the cube, which sides are facing the light, which sides aren't. So where's the cube in her head? Think about the cast shadows, which parts of her head are sticking out and casting shadows, like the nose or other areas. And then we will start to sort of get a realistic object soon. So I'm going to get a new layer. Before I do any of that, actually, just remembered. You have to change these lines from black to a more skin-friendly, blendable dark tone. So I got the color replacement tool. All you have to do is just keep your keep clicked on the brush tool and then move down toward the color replacement tool. Choose the color that you want to replace everything to. So I'm going to choose the red tone, but I'm going to move it down a little bit toward a brown, browny gray. That's going to be easy to blend into the skin because remember we're getting rid of the lines. So I'm going to choose the luminosity first. You have to go to the drop down menu up here on the color replacement tool menu and choose luminosity or else the color won't change. This will change the black into the value of the color that you want to change it into. So you got to do luminosity first. Increase the size of my brush. It's kind of a tricky little tool. You know the little crosshair? You got to get that on everything. It's maybe got to zoom in a little so it can actually get them. So right now it's turning it into the gray tone version of the color I want. Really amazing tool on Photoshop. One of their most useful tools. Okay, so I'm just trying to get all these lines. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect with the clothing area because that way when you get to the clothes it doesn't really matter, but it has to be sort of, you have to make sure all the lines are on their gray tone in the skin tone area. Basically face and skin, any flesh that's exposed, because all of that is going to turn into realism. It's not as hard as you think. You just have to appreciate some level of physics. You have to start thinking about physics. It's no longer just lines and a sketchbook and a pencil. You have to start thinking about some physics. Alright, so new layer. This is changed. Going to go into the color mode on the color replacement tool and just do the same thing. And now these colors, the color that I chose is emerging. I'm not going to choose vibrancy or saturation or hue because it's really not that important. I just need that rich brown color. And I'm changing all of that after it turned into the gray. Remember, it won't work if you don't turn it into gray first. So it's a very cute drawing. So good job. What's her name again? Wow Awero. Okay, I think I got everything. Yeah, I think that's it. Alright, so that's taken care of. I'm going to jump into the layer, the skin tone layer now. Go back to my brush tool, get that base tone I prepared, and I'm just going to brush it over everything. So it's a nice base tone that's got a lot of red and a lot of peach in it, so it will bring the character to life. So now that I have that in there, I want to know where my light source is coming from. So I'm going to choose a light source color. The light source is going to come off camera, a little bit to the top, so somewhere over here, but like actually in front of her. So the light is going to be shining this way in front of her. I'm going to keep that color on the side over here to remind me where the angle is coming from. So now I'm going to start getting my light tone color and I'm going to start defining areas that are exposed to the light. So I'm going to treat this as a very, very basic cube. So with my opacity is always like at 100 or a little bit higher than that. I'm going to place half of that in light and then I'm going to try, by not blending certain areas like we did with the cube, I'm going to try to find areas that are supposed to be sort of the edge of the face. So where the edge happens, where there are high points being, casting shadows on other points. I'm going to take this into time lapse thinking about the cube and then I'll explain what I've done after. Okay, so what I did here is I was just thinking about, again, the cube and the cast shadows, casting some shadows along the face to try to get a sense of space and depth. So the fact that we cast a shadow under these hair strands means that these hair strands are in front of the head, casting a shadow standing in the way of the light lines and in the way of the light. So that's one way to really bring an image to life, is to create the sense of depth. And that's what thinking about the cube and thinking about the contours does. It makes the audience feel like they're looking at an object that exists in 3D space. Remember the canvas? That is a cube already waiting for you to bring this character to life. So there's already all the physics waiting for you even before you draw your first line. So I'm thinking about the fact that the cheeks are high, so they're going to get some light touching them. So I just throw a blob and I try to cast the shadow of the nose over top. Also, the eyeballs emerge outward, so they're going to have a little bit of light on them and a little bit of shadow. So see, I'm treating the eye, without drawing it yet, I'm treating it as a 3D object. I'm going to get some more light here and just throw it over, treating the eyeball like a sphere. And do you see I brought some shadow onto the white of the eye? That's for a very specific purpose. That really allows, you know, the palette to be a little bit more controlled. Instead of just throwing a big white on the white of the eye, just throw a medium tone and it'll sort of bring the image to life a little better. I'm going to think about the eyebrows. These are not the eyebrows, these are the eyebrow shades. Please differentiate between the two. Don't confuse eyebrows with their shades and their shadows. Where else would we have some shadow? So eyelids have some light on them because they stick out a little bit, so they get see. I'm not really worried about the light, I'm not really worried about the bleed. I'm kind of okay. It's okay if it's messy. I don't mind. I'm going to bring in some secondary light source on the sides over here, just so that we can diffuse some of this. It's going to be softer, just so that we can diffuse some of the shadow, and it's also going to bring the image to life a little bit better, and more depth is going to be present. I'm going to take it to just the side of the cheek and the side of the nose over here. I'm going to get my base tone, put it at sort of now I'm going to delete everything before this. Now I'm going to get my base tone and sort of just brush it at 50% over everything. I don't want it to seem like the sunlight is really bright outside. And now that I've gotten what I needed from my light little bulb, I'm just going to get rid of it because it's kind of distracting at the top corner. And I'm going to bring all this intensity down and then get my highlighter color again and place the rest of the light that I just erased away only where I really need it. So this is the sort of rendering spot. So this is where you start blending. I'm going to place it only in the areas where I really need it, where the light is really intense. So this isn't really cell shading. It started off something similar to cell shading. It's kind of a mix of the two right now. But since we started blending, we're going to have to be a little bit more careful. And make sure that we're using the light only where we need it. Okay. So at this point, this is the time sort of where I separate the lines that I need and the lines that I don't need. So I'm going to go into lasso tool, and I'm going to separate the lines used on the face from the lines used on the head or the hair or anywhere else. So I just want to separate these lines from each other, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend them. I'm going to merge the layers together. So I think that's good. I don't mind much about actually let me separate the neck as well. And these layers will be merged again together as one layer eventually. It's always best to paint in as little layers as possible. You don't want to build a dependency on the layers. It won't make that painterly feel happen in your image. It'll feel really disconnected. Alright, so I think that's it. Separated. It's okay if it's not neat. It's not that important to be neat. Alright, so now we have to start thinking about anatomy. So I threw in some really basic shades, and the anatomy now is sort of like the tough thing. We have to make this by keeping them, so we're not going to be shrinking anything. We're not going to be shrinking eyes, we're not going to be shrinking noses or changing the shape. We're going to keep these proportions but make them look realistic. So anatomically, an eye is a sphere. So we have to sphericize this anime eye. So we have to act like it's sitting on top of an actual eyeball. So this is the realistic anatomy coming in, influencing the way we shade this eye. So I'm going to get the shadow tone that I have, and I'm going to use it to draw over, turning this off, I'm going to use it to draw over, sort of get a feel for a upper eyelid curving down toward eye corners, or the little corners of the eyes over here, trying not to break any of my shading that I did, because that's the cube and I cannot interrupt the core shadows. This is the core shadow half. I cannot interrupt that core shadow. So just doing just that. I'm going to make the eyeball, the ball of the eye, a little bit more spherical, because it won't feel realistic if it's oval. So if it looks like this, it won't feel realistic. It has to look like a circle. So I could go into Liquefy and do it, but again, I don't want to change the shape too much. So she's gazing somewhere into the distance, so we have to place in sort of indicator of where she's looking. So I'm going to fill that in. I'm going to get that dark tone I had before, and I'm going to try to get the circles, the little pupils of the eyes, kind of pointing or looking at a point in the distance to make them feel like they're actually looking. And I'm going to get that shadow color again and throw it over all the top half, the whole half of the top of the eye, because that's the shadow of the eyelid and the eyelashes happening. And that really brings in a buttload of realism. Because if you're casting shadows even at that level, on that tiny level, it means you have so much depth in the room. You have an actual 3D realm where this character exists. And I'm making sure not to use too dark tones. If you're going too dark too soon, you're going to lose a lot of opportunity to illustrate form. You're going to lose a lot, so be careful. I'm going to bring in a corner, an eye corner. I'm going to choose this color and just bring it in. And then I'm going to choose this tone and then just draw an eye corner over here. And after that, for me, it gets really easy, because as soon as I find one part of the anatomy, everything else sort of is easy to find. So if you find one piece, the rest is really easy to find. So all I found was the top eyelid, and then now I know where to place everything else, because it's sort of, you feel lost if you don't know where to place everything. But as soon as you have one of the pieces, knowing where that is, works as a landmark to find the rest. So I'm placing a light over the eye. Why did I say island? Just thinking about the eyeball is sticking out, catching some light. Being careful not to use too much light, of course. Now I'm going to get that same shadow color and use it for the bottom eyelid. And again, just thinking about a sphere. So these little wings, they're going to turn into eyelashes. They're not really part of the actual sphere. They're part of the eyelashes. So I'm going to brush them off and keep the sphere. They will come back, but there's some stuff we do have to sacrifice for the sake of the realism. So I'm going to continue these lower eyelids over to this way, thinking about how the light source is influencing these shadows. Okay, same thing over here. Some light will be on the inner eyelid of the lower eyelid. There will be a crease. Oops. There will be a crease here as well. Trying not to paint makeup in. I'm trying to think about the shadows instead of the makeup. So I will bring the hair back in. The hair will eventually come back and it will change how I cast shadows again. All I'm thinking about is the eyelids as part of a sphere. So you see, lines become really obsolete. They're no longer useful. And I'll show you how to do the nose as well. The nose will turn into a real nose. So Bob and Steve are going to be called in. So you see the light on this side of the eyeball? Really important. The light on this side of the eyeball as well. So I'm going to cast some shadows on the inner eye as well. So I'm going to get some of that light, and I'm not going to put the light here. I'm going to put a big light because that's all anime still. I'm trying to think realistically. So realistically, eyes, when light shines on them, the side of the eye gets illuminated because that's the side of the bowl of the eye that gets the shadow, that gets the light, and the other side of the bowl, because the eye is sort of like a bowl, you know, like a rice bowl. And it's sort of, if there's a light coming this way, this part is going to be dark and this part is going to be light because this is the part that faces forward and this is the part that faces away. Just like this part would be dark and this part would be light if the light shines this way or this way on it. So this is the part that's lit. This is the part that's shadowed. Okay. So not trying to do too much. Another tip is after I sort of get that basic lighting happening, I go down to my basic brush, my basic circle brush, and I will get the darkest black I want to use for the face. So I'm going to choose my dark tone and then work from that. It'll get darker and darker and I just stamp that in there. Because the eye, if I want to make it realistic, I have to work with realistic proportions. So I just use that. And I know that feels a little bit weird to you right now, but that's pretty much what we're doing, is we're trying to bring these proportions to life. I'm going to go back to my brush. Where is it? And just continue thinking about the eyelid. It's okay if it looks weird to you right now because that's your anime still in your mind. As soon as we start thinking about the realism, it'll start to fall into place. Because remember, we're keeping the anime proportions here. We're not changing them. We're not removing them. Okay, now I'm going to draw the water line because water lines are part of the realistic structure of the eye. Some water line over here. Now I'm just going to start shading a little bit by using that black and shading that half that is dark so it doesn't look so extreme. Get that shade again and then introduce an eyelid. And you see this eye is only going to get bigger and bigger because we're expanding its size. But it will still feel like an anime face, because the reason why it'll feel like an anime face still is because we've kept the proportions. We haven't changed sizes. That's the thing with anime, is a great deal of anime is in proportion. It's okay if things look muddy and murky. I mean, I get that feeling sometimes if I feel like the colors I chose are a bit murky. If you're working with Photoshop, that's easy to work around. So now I'm going to think about that lash line that I got rid of. I'm going to zoom out. So you see I'm not zooming in. Please don't zoom in your work. it's really bad for your control over your values. I'm going to bring in a light reflected from this side up into this part of the light in the eye. This is all early stuff, you know, this isn't where the magic happens. This is all, it is important, definitely. This is all the early stuff. So I'm literally just, you know, drawing in a realistic eyeball, the way that eyeball works, cutting it off, areas where there's shadow. Thinking about the eye, the way eyes are shaded in real life. So get some studies, get a reference. I'm just working out of my visual library right now, stuff that I remember about eyes. Okay. I'm going to use my soft brush now. It's really good for blending skin. Everyone should have a soft brush in their toolkit. And I'm just using it to blend some of those general shades that float around. I'm going to bring in an eyebrow. Just a simple eyebrow shade. Nothing too realistic, nothing too intense, just basic shades. It's going to cast a shadow on this part of the eye. I'm going to stretch this way. Lighten it up. Clean up the mess, and then replace in the shadows as you need them. So place the darks only in these areas here. And I'm just going to shrink my brush and then sharpen the edges. Sorry about the chirping of the birds. Birds have nested in our laundry room. They're outside, but there's a little bit of a vent that we can hear them. So they chirp every day. That's their second set of babies. The first set of babies already flew. Isn't that cute? Alright, so I'm thinking about the shadows still. Thinking about the light. Light coming in from the side. The side of the eyebrow will be dark. Zooming out. I'm just bringing in like basic anatomy. Eyebrows, eyes. It's really messy at this stage, and it's okay. Because we had lines before, we didn't get a chance to go in right away with our stuff. In our drawing and our inspiration, we had to work with lines. So there's a lot of, you know, it's like a hack job. We have to just get through that level of cleaning and Photoshop editing, and, you know, just get it out of the way. And out of that, we'll sort of start getting the image come through. Bringing in an eyelid over on this eye here. Getting some basic shadows. This eyelid here as well. And sometimes I'll change my mind about where I want the face to go, so it's okay if you don't know where you're going at this stage. Because I'm just sort of thinking about what I feel, and I'm just like thinking about how it can seem really, really daunting and really, really easy to give up at this stage because it's just not reading, because you're in that weird place between anime and realism right now, and it can get really sort of demotivating. But as soon as you just think about the basic forms and the dark spots of a face, it'll start falling into place. That rhymed. Getting back some of the stuff I accidentally painted away. Gonna get that black, take it down like really low opacity and brush it over the eye. Trying to get the values to match. Nothing is too light, nothing is too dark. I'm going to get that beige skin tone and then brush it over the top of the eye over here. I didn't have eyebrows, so I'm painting in these realistic eyebrows. I might change my mind about them and just draw in a line the way they do in anime. But I still have to keep the basic core of the shadows. So you see these shadows I didn't erase away. Placing in some light on the brow bone. All that stuff. Opening that up. Basic anatomy parts. So the pinks here, I'm going to use them for the eyes soon. I'm going to change the color of the eyes. I usually just use the skin tones that I have for the eye color. But I will use color layer and I will bring in a color for the eyes. But I just want to get the basics. It's like working in grayscale. I just work in sepia right now, sort of. That's what it's called. I'm like basically working in grayscale, but I'm still in color. I don't want to work actual grayscale, because that's another step I have to deal with. But if you feel like you have to work in grayscale, feel free. It will only boost your realism, and it'll help you get control over the values. So continuing that cast shadow from before. That's too dark. Eyelids cast a shadow over the eye. Please remember that. It's really important. Shadow here. Some light here. Alright, so now for the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that dot. And I'm going to extend that down. And for noses, you can't have a dot for a nose. In realism, you have to have the dark spots. So I'm going to give it a bit of a curved edge instead of that pointed edge, and I'm going to bring in a nostril. Zoom out, make sure it's right. So basically there's the slit of the nostril and then a little nostril side. And same thing over here. And actually, I'm not going to use that dark, I'm going to use the mid-tone. Take it over this way. Just thinking about which sides of the nostril are going to be visible, because this is a 3/4 view. And the nose is casting a shadow this way. And then the lips, of course, this is not a, as soon as we bring in the nose, things start to look realistic. So I'm going to think about the dark spots of the lips as well. So I'm just going to extend this shadow all the way across, because that's the top lip. This is still there. A curve of the chin that I drew in before is still there. And I'm going to get this and place it on the bottom. I still want to have her expression, that curious expression, or like neutral. I'll brush over this a little. Soften up any areas. So now I'm starting to get a feel for a realistic face. Sort of feeling my way around it. Always zoom out. As soon as I zoom out, I find all my mistakes. So you gotta make sure you zoom out. This would actually be facing that way. So we're starting to get the realism in there, and you can stop here and you can just keep going. You could stop before we change the nose. You could stop after that first level where I was just placing in blocking in the core that's basically like cell shading. You can stop there. You can stop at any point, because that's sort of anime proportions. They're really forgiving. All they need is a little bit and they sort of come to life, because the lines do the rest. Okay, so I'm placing in some basic shade over here, just to get that expression of hers. One thing you can do is opt out 2 sets of the dark eye of the dark spots for another set. So if you have 2 dark spots for the eyes and the lips, you probably don't need the nose. And you can choose which one you want, but you have to have 2 of the 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4 and get rid of which one you want. It'll still work. I'm going to bring in some of that red on the nose. I'm going to bring in some of it on the lips, some on the cheeks, because this is areas of blood. So they're going to have a little bit of form to them. I'm going to take this shade down. And again, just thinking about where I need it the most, where I need those shades the most. So over here on the side of the nose, because that part faces the light the most. Oopsie. On the side of the eyes, it travels along the eyes. On the side of the lips, on the chin. Trying to keep this line consistent because that's the edge. And you see what happened when we brought in the blush? It really, really came to life. Oops, I need those cast shadows. I'll place them in again once I bring the hair back in. Again, I brush in and then erase away what I don't need until I'm satisfied with the level of light that I'm in. You see, this is what I said. It's okay if it's messy because you can clean it up at this stage. It doesn't have to be that neat. You can be as messy as you want to be, because as long as you're thinking about the dark spots, as long as you're not going too dark, as long as you're thinking about the light source, it's going to fall into place eventually. I'm going to match these lips with the corners of the nose. And then lips usually have a cupid's bow under them, so I'm going to cast a shadow here and then bring in a light there for the cupid's bow. Brought in a very basic lip light. Oops. And I will get my line art again and make sure that I haven't deviated too far, so I will get the line art that artist drew. What's her name? Wow Wowero. Sorry, I don't know how to say her DeviantArt name. Okay, so I didn't jump into Liquefy, as you saw. Very, very just careful shading. I'm going to flip the canvas horizontally and make sure I'm making the eyes similar so I can see problems really, really quickly. Or else I'd have to wait until the very end, and then I'll probably start seeing some of the problems. But if you flip your canvas early, you will avoid a lot of editing later. So just thinking about balancing and symmetry is really good. Flipping the canvas is really good for that. So darkening these areas, making sure they're uniform. I'm going to get a darker black. So at this stage, you see, I only now did I choose the black, because I don't need it. It's not even black, it's a brown. Because I don't need it early on. I just need to know where the shadows are early on. To get it too early is to depend on it too early, and that's lines. We don't need lines. We're trying to do the opposite of lines. So I got that basic symmetry down. I think the artist had a measuring issue, so I might have to shift this eye a little bit higher because it is a little bit low. But other than that, I don't think I'll be changing the eyes much. I'm going to get lasso, and I'm just going to, oopsie, shift this eye up and to the side. Just like that. That seems to work. Because it was a bit shifted off to the side. And you see, that wasn't visible when we had lines. that's why lines are, they have their own realm. You can make a lot of mistakes with lines and you won't notice because there's no realism in there. There's no symmetry required. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is bring in some colors. I'm going to bring in a basic blue. If you know me, you know I like blue eyes. And I'm going to use it on the eyes. And what that does is it also makes the eye white blue. So I don't just put it only on this part, I put it on everything. Really low opacity. Make sure you have your opacity low. You don't need much to make it read. And I'm going to place the rest of the blue mostly on the eyeball. And then any area that has shadow in it doesn't have as much blue as areas that have light in it. So I'm going to place the rest of the blue on only areas that are lit up, that have some light on them. Just over here. So don't overdo it. You have to be careful. So let's compare before and after. So this was sort of the grayscale that I was working with. Not really grayscale, it was the beige. The skin tones, and now I'm bringing in that color. I'm also going to use the color to bring in some more reds into the lip area, the nose, areas that are touched by the light, just like here, the cheeks, all the way up into the eyes, just brushing that cheek all the way to this side. Before, after. So that color really, really brightens everything up. Even though there's no brightness involved, it's just the color. So this cast shadow is that cube that I was telling you about. So this nose is another cube in front of another cube. So it's going to cast its shadow along everything and influencing that. And I will bring in some lashes soon. Just only when I feel like I need them. And I kind of use that black, so I'm going to bring in some reds now on the inner parts of the eyes, so the waterline, and that will bring in some realism with it as well. Because that, again, we're trying to make a realistic anime character. So we have to make it seem like their eyes can blink. So one really useful tool for that is the waterline. That makes eyes look really realistic, almost as useful as the shadow of the eyeball, the shadow of the eyelid on the eyeball. Getting that shadow again, just making sure everything is nice and sharp. I might relocate this highlight, place it somewhere else, somewhere more strategic. Probably somewhere where the light touches it. I'm going to bring in a lesser blue, not so much of a blue. That, balancing it, making sure all the blue is only in one area of the face, one area of the eye, sorry. And I'm going to go back to my soft brush and just keep softening until I get that nice realistic blend. I'm going to go darker one more time, and that's the pure black. And I'm going to use that on the inner part of the eye. Actually, I'm just going to use that brush that I showed you, the hard brush. Sort of aim it well. And that really helps to just, save you a lot of time with blending. It's too sharp, just blurred it a little bit. Again, I'm going to get my soft brush and just keep blending Staying zoomed out. So when I bring in that eye light, it's really going to make an impact. The spectral light, I think it's called. Alright, so I'm going to bring it in now. Actually, I'm going to use dodge tool before that, and I'm just going to give a nice little glow on the side that's lit up in the eye. You can use the brush to do this, it's just dodge tool is going to save me a lot of time. Shadowing areas that don't get any light on them. And I'm going to get that all the way up to 100% and place that eye light just on the sides up here, right under the eye shadow, meaning the shadow of the eyelid shadow, because it wouldn't be up here because the shadow would be blocking that area. It kind of bleeds over into the eye, just like this, depending on the light, the kind of shadow it is, or it goes over the entire eye. So it might just go over into that, just like this. Really chooses, it's your choice. It depends on you. Just trying to balance them, flipping my canvas. I'm liking how that looks. To maintain the sphere of the eye, I'm always trying to make sure the realism is never depleted, that it's always present. Oops, just the eye corner over here. Being aware not to use too much black on the eyelids, because that doesn't really look that realistic, but we kind of have to because of the anime. And now I'm just going to carry that shadow off into the side. I'll use this one. So this is the area that's in shadow, so it's going to have a bit of a saturated, it's sort of a saturated realm because it's under the shadows, so there's a lot of blood in that area. And I'm trying to avoid using lines for the eyelids. So it's just a combination, a delicate combination of shadow, shades, and stuff like that. Just sculpting, basically, is what you're doing. Treat it like a building. Just like this. Maintaining my edges. Nothing is too lined up. I'm trying to avoid lines as much as possible because they're what's going to flatten this image. They will flatten it. So I have to avoid them. Just trusting my artistic instinct at this point. Nothing too creative is happening. And again, thinking about it as a building. So I'm going to bring in that yellow into the eye. Because remember, if the light has a color, it will change everything with it. Everything will get its intensity and its color. I gotta zoom out. Get some of that shade on the inner side of the eyelid where the light isn't touching. Just getting lots and lots of pinks, keeping it looking alive. I'm gonna get my sponge and desaturate a little bit of the blue away. Excuse me. Kinda had dinner before this. A little bit of that blue. So you see we have all of those signifiers of anime still intact. We just now have some realism to bring it to life. Some highlights on the nose. And sometimes you don't need to push the realism all the way. Sometimes it's very little that's required in order for us to really get the impact. And finally I'm going to get rid of that shade we have over here. I'll carry that blush out. Keep this part lit before I do that. I'll just get my eraser and just erase it away. My lines are still there to help me through. They're just telling me where everything goes, but they're not responsible for the form. They are just pointers, assistants. And as soon as we get rid of that and sharpen the edge, it'll really, really come to life. It'll feel like a single standing object in open space. But we gotta get rid of these lines. So how do you get rid of this line? I'm just gonna get the shade that's closest to it and just literally draw over it. And then not blend it with the chin. With the neck. Not blend the chin with the neck. And that's how it'll sort of go away. Go away, line, go away. I don't need you. Thank you for your help though, Mr. Line. But yeah. Okay, continuing this all the way through. Getting rid of that line where I don't need it. And I'll zoom out again in a sec. So I'm not painting with any specific textured brush. All that stuff you can lay over at the end if you want to texturize. You just got to make sure you texturize around the image, not interrupting any core shadows that you established. Just erasing the edges. Remember, we were very, very messy early on, but now we have to clean it up. Now it's starting to look like a 3D model because we've treated it like a 3D model, like something three-dimensional. And I'm gonna get my brush. I'm gonna bring in a little bit of texture because I don't like everything looking so smooth. And I'm just gonna stipple. Stippling is just like pressing your brush down over and over, just like this, until you get that nice little texture. So we've preserved those anime features without causing too much of a ruckus with the form. Placing some light at the top of the lid where the light is touching. Softening up the eyebrows a little. Some of the secondary light source is illuminating this side of the eye. The secondary light source that we placed in before. You can see it's not really easy. It's not like you have to work along the lines, you have to be careful, all that stuff. So just, feel your way through it. Don't be too scared. And you'll sort of figure yourself out. You'll know where you want all of the units to go. I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna brush it over everything here because I want the feeling that this is in that shadowed area. So I'm gonna brush it over the eyelids, not the darks of the eyes, because I'm just gonna have to darken it again. So you see everything is very, very light. And the eyelids, I've done them very, very carefully. I kind of got rid of that pink. Don't know how. Bring it back in. This is a water line again. Getting that eyelid to come through. Those lashes we were talking about earlier, I'll just place them into a new layer. Outline this here. This point I have to zoom in, you see, so we're getting some detail. We're getting that detail that we want. So I'm going to use the smudge tool to sort of texturize a little. What I'm going to do is just kind of overblend, but not cleanly. So what that's going to do is it's going to bring in some texture and sort of mess around, mess up what I made, but along the lines, so it's not going to be too messy. I'm going to blend areas that I want to blend. So areas along the nose. So the nose is the sharpest point of that side that we did. Chin needs to be blended a little. This area here needs to be illuminated. And you see that pink that we found in that dodge tool? We have to bring that in to the face. So I'm going to choose a lighter tone for the highlight that's a lot more pink and saturated. And that's going to go in between, that's going to go in between the shadows and the highlights right over here. I'm going to get the soft brush for this job. Soft brush is good at sort of not interrupting too much. I'm going to place it in all the areas where there is a shadow and a light clashing. So this happens in real life. We get like a nice saturation line in between the base tone of the object receiving the cast shadow on it. And I'm going to use the dodge tool for effect. Dodge tool is crazy, be careful. I'm going to bring in some highlight on the cheekbones. Still need to fix the face. So I will have to jump into Liquefy for the proportion of the face. The soft brush again. I'm just trying to capture some core shades that happen around the eyes. the tricky job to interrupt everything. Same thing over here. Push it up into the corners. So the eye looks like it's fitting right into the skull and the skin. Keeping it illuminated. It's okay if it's messy. At least just this part, not everything. And smudge that. So if this was traditional, I'd be using like my finger to sort of smudge it the way I use it on pencil. And that's just to sort of unify the shades together. And just make everything blended, so if I do want anything particularly dark or shadowed or sharp or detailed, I can go in and it'll be fairly easy to take care of. I'm going to throw some of that pink over the eye actually. Kind of feeling like it should be a pink. Not too sure. Might decide later. It's a mix. Thinking about that secondary light source. Trying to make the nostril read a little bit better. You see, only now I'm starting to zoom in. Please remember that. Don't zoom in early. No premature zooming in. Some highlights on the lower part of the nose, the secondary light source again. Really changes how the face looks. Some secondary light source along this side of the lips. It's just really a relationship of light. That's what I always say. I'm starting to sort of feel it. Still not there yet. So you can keep your anime lines. You can go this far. Just remember, it's all about treating it as if you want to have any realism in your anime drawing, even if it's not this real, because this is a lot of work. But if you want to go just a little bit real, keep your lines. Just remember to shade as if it was a cube. That's the key. Remember the cube and the cube that I drew and the cast shadow? All of that is what you have to think about. I'm going to bring in some eyelids. Just some rough lines thrown over. I'll clean them up later. Some light over here. Some light carrying down from this eye. From the secondary light source. So we're going to have something of a clash somewhere in the middle, right along the nose. And it's going to be a bit saturated, so I'm going to use the burn tool. Burn tool darkens and saturates. Really, really great for that if you put it on shadows. It's really helpful. I'm going to blend again. Just trying to make it feel painterly instead of so digital. I don't like it when it feels too digital. Actually, I hate it when it feels too digital. So I'm kind of trying to find that sweet spot. Get the shadow, throw it over the eyelids. Almost there. Not just yet. So you see, it's a guess game. Sometimes you guys look at your heroes who you want to be like, and you think, wow, this person must be so amazing. Sometimes it's just really, they're just guessing their way through, and they don't really know what they're doing as much as you think they do. Sometimes it's just, it's like at any moment we feel like the painting is just going to run away from us. And we have to just keep trying to convince it to stay. I'm going to push this cheek down because it's really asymmetrical. It's starting to look like a doll, but it's still got that anime. So when I bring the eyelashes back, I'm going to sort of bring that anime feeling back to it as well. Shrink the nose that I painted, because that's a key to that anime feeling, is the shrunken nose. Also, the lips need a bit more of an expression. Kind of don't like it too large, Cupid's bow. Kind of like it a little bit cut off. So usually I would do this with my paintbrush because then I could get that texturally feeling in there. But right now I have to use Liquefy. So before, after, just minor adjustments. So this is why when you do the lines, you have to be careful that you remember your lines are going to be unchangeable. So you can shrink the eyes if you don't want it to feel like such a doll. So let's shrink the eyes and let me show you sort of what it'll look like with shrunken eyes. It'll feel a little bit more realistic because these are the eyes, the Disney eyes, sort of the really large ones. So if I shrink them, it'll still look really nice. As you can see, it'll still feel good. But remember, anime is sort of in that realm where it's a little bit larger than life. So this is the question. Do you not want to change any of your features? Do you not want to change any sizes? You'll get to this point here. It's basically the tutorial's done. It's finished. But if you want to bring in that realism, but also not have to keep the exact right sizes that you had early on, which is the sizes you had, the size of the eye when it was in lines, you can go and shrink the eyes, because part of making something realistic from anime is shrinking the eyes, because the eyes are unrealistically large. So that when we do paint realistically, they'll feel wrong. So you can go and shrink the eyes if you would like. And it'll sort of look something like this. Shrink them early on as well. Gotta be careful with my pen pressure. It's so intense, jeez. Okay, sorry. Liquefy. Sometimes it's a good girl and sometimes it's a bad girl. Alright, I'm gonna push into the cheeks in. This is very, very anime signature. And square off the chin a little bit. And that'll be sort of the equivalent of those anime faces that are all triangles. Not really triangles, they're more like curved off. Just like that. So before, you can keep this, it still works. After, this is a bit more anime as well. So it depends. If you're painting realistically, they will look like humongous eyes. So you just have to find that again, that sweet spot between realism and anime, and whatever works for you. In between that, keep painting away the red of the eye. Stay put. Okay, and there's detail that you can bring into the eyeball as well. You can bring in some more blues, so you can mess around with the colors. You can throw in that haze. Another way to make the eyes look super realistic is to bring that blue back that I removed a little bit. So we have a little bit of blue in there. Bring that down, bring in some white or a white blue in a new layer, and just brush it over the eye just like this. And that'll sort of create the feeling of an eye that has water on it, and then erase away what you don't need. So I'm going to erase away with a soft brush, of course. Come on. That'll give it that soft look. You can also shrink the eyeball, or the pupil. You can shrink it down. So I enlarged it, as you remember, but you can shrink it down. Which will give it that, which will sort of further that little bit closer to anime feeling. Kind of feel really weird after looking at it for being large for so long. You can do that, or you can just find the mid zone, something in between the two. I'm using Liquefy right now, filter, Liquefy. It's really just a matter of where you want to take. I think this is closer to anime as well. And then for the eyebrows, don't just use a black, please. Make sure you're working in the shadow of the eyebrow. And anime eyebrows are just lines. They're going to be thin eyebrows. They translate as thin eyebrows in real life. So just a hint of an eyebrow, and don't just leave it sitting there. Shade it a little bit. So bring in some detail. Make it feel like an actual eyebrow. Because we're trying to make it so that this anime character came to life. And then of course every eyebrow casts a shadow. Same thing on this side. Shade it, make it feel like it's real. Actual hairs growing out. So you see it's not much that went into the lips. You see the lips are just one basic shade. There isn't even much going on. And we have that sort of anime face. Whoopsie. Just gonna erase, make sure I'm not impeding on that core shade that's happening over here, which is really important for the believability of this three-dimensional cube that is the face. Just along this side. And then I'll enable the lower layer soon and just sort of show you how to cast the shadows of the hair. Just like that. Just illuminating details, sharpening things up. So this is where we clean up. This is where you're supposed to clean up. You can start using a textured brush if you want. I probably want to use this. Because now you know sort of where everything is. Before it was an experimentation, and this is the sort of result. So now you can really clean things up very nicely. And my brush, this new brush that I'm using, is going to bring in some texture, so it's not going to feel so fake. like I actually 3D modeled it, because that's what it looks like sometimes when I treat it too much like a cube. I feel like I actually 3D modeled it. I don't like that look very much. This is a cast shadow. The nose also needs its own cast shadow. Just like that. I'm trying to always prove where the light source is. So the cast shadow proves the presence of the light source. It tells us where the light source is. This area needs to be sharper. We also need that pink, so we can't lose that. Get that secondary light source on the cheek from the side. When I'm done, I will bring in the hair. Sorry, sometimes I forget what I'm saying. Okay, gotta do this lower eyelid. I'm still trying to decide whether or not I want this lower eyelid to be lit up. Still not just there yet. Still experimenting. So painting, making anything look realistic is just a matter of knowing what 3D units are gonna be expected of you. So it's the cube and the shading of the cube, the cast shadow, so this casting of the shadows proving this object to be real. And that's important, because if the object is casting a shadow on another object, it means that object is real. It's in a room that has depth in it. So you don't have to change the proportions. You can keep it where it was before. You can stop when I was 20 minutes in. It's all up to you where you want to take the image. I'm going to throw in some rough lashes, and I'm going to try to throw the lashes in. Of course, realistically they have to be, but trying to re-illustrate that anime eye again. You see, it was really pushed off into the corners. So we do need lashes everywhere along the eye because it's a real eye. Not that real though, because it's kind of anime influenced. And one really, really good trick for, whoops, wrong side. One really, really good trick for lashes is just stipple really messy. This is really messy, as you see. Then get your smudge tool on soft brush. Keep it on 26. And just smudge out. Because lashes shouldn't be that detailed. You should be careful with lashes. That's sort of, the smudge tool I use a lot because in traditional I use it a lot. So like, my finger, I use my finger to sort of push the values along. So it's the same thing, I'm just trying to think about how much detail do I really need. And then I'm just going to use the smudge tool to sort of redirect the attention. I don't want lashes on the lower eyelashes. I think I'll just throw those out. And I have this really messy eyelash, and that's what I like. I think lashes take up too much attention. They're extra framing that we don't really need. So I always be really, really careful with lashes. Make sure they're not as dark as the eyeliner. I'm just super careful with them. It can be really demanding of attention, and I don't want to sort of do that to the painting. I feel like the eyes can really represent a lot of the form without the use of the lashes. I usually never have lashes, but I'll do it for the demonstration. Just trying to think about that anime eye from before, how it looked before. Decrease the opacity just a little. Blend it in with the eye. And the lashes end at one point. They don't go all the way around because that's not how real eyes work. Again, we want to create the feeling of realism. So at one point these lashes will stop and the other lashes will begin, but I don't want any lashes. Damn, where does that light, that pink go? I draw it and then it disappears. Damn it. Oh, it's right there. Sorry. So just making sure I have just an indication, not too much presence of the lashes. Again, they're not that useful to me because I took care of everything already. Just going to duplicate the layer to make it really dark. And then erase again. Besides, hair usually takes up a lot of the attention. So you see how much attention it's pulling away from the eyes? I'm just worried for that. I don't want to undo all the work that I just did on the eyes. Erasing. Just trying to continue some framing. Some ideas sort of come to me about the cube. I sort of just throw them in. Just going to merge that down. Soften that shadow up. Placing in really gentle eyelid. That's what I had before, working from what I had. Eyelid creases. So there is makeup in this, but remember that makeup has to be used in a way to complement the eyes, not overshadow them. Continuing the shade, being aware not to interrupt any core shadows or core lights that I have. Sort of fixing the shape of the head. So it kind of didn't have the same exact feeling as the original anime sketch because there was so much missing. It was a stamp, but now that we brought in some more realism, a lot of that character came to life. So she could have been angrier, more stern. Okay, just one last little bit and we're almost finished. I know it's a long tutorial. How many hours is it? It's an hour and 30 minutes already. Bringing in some highlights with the dodge tool. I'm going to fix the values of the eye one last time because they were kind of lightened up, and then after that, pretty much done. Hopefully you learned something or two from this video. So again, I'm not an anime artist. I'm not the best at anime. I don't do anime all the time. I do some. I like anime very much, but it's not my main. Main is basically just rendering full realistic faces. That's sort of what I like. This video is basically about how to apply all those realistic rules that other artists use onto anime proportions if you want to keep that anime look. This is like the extreme rendering of anime. You don't have to have all of it. So let's turn off these layers, get rid of some of this stuff, and just start casting some shadows. So the hair will have sort of corner of light here on everything. And this is very important to cast the shadow because the hair again is in front, so I'm just getting this back because I lost it. I had to turn off the hair because it was kind of in the way. I'll just blur that. Same thing with the other hairs, so there's a hair shadow on this side, and there's a hair shadow coming along this side on the eyelid, and there's a little bit of light on this side. So just using the same shadow that I had, same shadow color, nothing is new. The same light color. Actually, I don't want that one. Okay, so blurring. Just making sure they blend in. Again, shadows get lighter the further away they move from an object. Cast shadows, that is. Filter, liquefy. I'm going to fix the cheek one more time and then I'm done. Promise. I'm a real perfectionist, so sometimes I kind of overdo it. Fix the neck. Erase away at the neck. Usually I'm just going to use the hard eraser tool. Just fix the neck like that. So of course I don't have time to render the clothes. That's another day, another lesson. But I will clean up. Just need to save. Yeah, there we go. Always save your work. Don't be lazy. I will talk from experience. So if you want me to show you, I can show you how to sort of make the collarbones realistic as well. Really easy trick. Just going to get rid of that necklace because it's kind of in the way. So you see, guys, it's just the cube is what you got to think about. That cube, that infamous cube. So that line, I replaced it with a shadow. Basically what you're doing is you're just replacing lines with shadows. As for the collarbones, erase the whole collarbone and replace it with a light. if it's in the dark areas, it does have a shadow to it. Just like that, but it's not as light, so I'm going to use the midtone. It's not as light as areas where it's in the light. Soften that up. Just making sure everything is nice and balanced. You can make her angrier, like if you want, like that pouty anime face everybody loves. If you want. And then I need to shade this because it feels flat, this side of the face, so I'm going to bring in a very, very gentle shade. Just shade like that, just along the cheekbones. Where the cheekbones and the high points are the lightest spot, and nothing is lighter than that. Just blending in very, very gently. So you see it was all soft brush. No special brush. Don't ask me about my brushes. I don't want to see comments about where can I find your brush. It's not about the brush. The brush will not do anything for you. Okay, so don't be asking me that question, yo. Because I will get mad. I won't get mad. Most likely. I won't. I don't want the edge to be dark. I mean hard. So I'm just going to soften the edge by, blur tool, or you can use a soft brush. I don't like, skin tones have soft edges. Skin has a soft edge. It's fuzzy. So you want to fuzz it up. Let me clean up the hair part. I'm not going to erase what I did. I will use a gray. Sort of hide that part under the hair. I know this was a long tutorial. Sorry. I kind of like to keep the ones that I do separate from the ones that aren't critique hours. I like to do them sort of shorter and sort of nicer and more focused. But this is a very big topic. It's got a lot to do with realism and all those rules. There will be a cast shadow on the cheek from this. From this hair. Sorry, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of rules, and I just have to make sure I cover them all for you guys. What am I even doing? What the fuck? Alright. Erasing that. So that's the secondary light source, casting a shadow on that hair, casting it up. And then, yeah, back to cleaning up. And I've done a lot of videos on how to sort of shade hair and stuff like that. So hair should be pretty easy compared to the cube and the rendering. I do have like segments in the critique hours where there is like a small hair lesson. You can find them in there as well. So be sure to come by the critique hours as well. Everyone is always welcome. Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you'd like to come by. The neck is more curved than that. The light sort of moves across. I haven't rendered the body, I am sorry. It's mostly the face that's important to you guys. That's why I focus the most on it. So the shadow gets fuzzier the further away we move. Sharper the closer you get. Some minor secondary light source on this. To blur that. So this shadow is getting closer to the shirt, so it's going to get darker and sharper the closer it gets to the shirt. And that's how you sort of make the shadow feel real. Gonna get my smudge tool. Just soften that shadow that I added on the hair. It's attracting too much attention. Smudging that neckline over here. Back into Liquefy. Okay, and one last thing that I would do is I would sort of just lighten up the whole thing one more time, darken up the whole thing one more time. So I would just do this and erase away what I don't need. So obviously around the eyes, around these areas, around the nose. That way I'm keeping it, I'm thinking about, only what I need in light source. What I don't need isn't included. The neck can't be as light as the face. It has to be darker. And the sort of cleavage can just be a little dark, just along this side. Just like that. Again, just going back and erasing what I don't need. I do need shadows. I do need some of these lights here. So this is what we added just now. You see what it sort of did for the form. Made sure that we're focusing only on what we need. Just trying to decide how much I want. Shadow for the neck. Separate it. See, I promised you it would be done, but I told you I'm a perfectionist. It has to be perfect. Else I won't sleep at night. Separate the face from the neck, giving the neck its own shadow. At this point, it depends on the background. I chose colors that came out of a really bright scene. You can desaturate the skin tone or saturate the skin tone. It depends on exactly where you want it to be. I chose a pretty light one. I might desaturate just a little. But that's pretty much it. I hope that was helpful. Might just mess around just a little bit more with the eyes. Don't seem to know where to stop. So I'm going to merge down and filter, sharpen, and sharp mask to bring out those details. So it kind of gives my brush some texture before or after. And I do want to bring in another color on the eyes. Just one last little edit. Yeah, right. Just to give the eyes a little bit more blue. And then I'm going to take it down to a green and put some green on the inside. Merge that down. The signature of anime is, of course, the white lights, so we have to sort of respect their need, but not overdo it. Because this is all about anime, sort of. Sharpen, sharpen. So see, those lashes aren't really necessary, especially if you have hair. You don't really need to focus too much on the lashes. I'm gonna turn on the color mode. The color palette that I made, and then bring back some of that blush. That was kind of lost in the blending. It's always better to work carefully and just bring in as you need. I'm going to place that blush around the eyes like a C. So it's not just in the cheek, it's all around. A little bit on the nose, a little bit on the lips, a little bit on the eyelids, the upper eyelids. There's definitely blush there. That'll really bring it to life. And I'm going to bring in some green under the eye. That also gives some realism. Really, really desaturated, and be careful. Don't overdo it. And that's it. Let me get that layer back where it was just the anime character. So let me just do a before and after real quick for all y'all. Turn that off. So before, this is by wowwowero.deviantart.com. I'll link it. And after. So we messed a lot with the face, changed up everything, kind of made the proportions match. You see her eyes were very big before, and we shrunk the head, so the eyes became very big, which just made it necessary for us to shrink the eyes. And after all of that, that's what you get. Think about it as a cube, shade and cast some shadows. Think about the core sciences of it all. I do have some blending. It's not completely finished, of course, but this is a sort of a place to be. Thinking about the function. So if you want to make something look realistic, you got to think about the function. How does the eye work? So a realistic eye actually can blink. So you need both eyelids, the upper and lower eyelid. Don't forget the lower eyelid. Remember that lines are stamped. They're not the real thing, so you're not going to be able to do anything with those lines. You're going to have to get rid of them. The cast shadows are necessary because if you want depth, you want to make it look like this is a real place, you're going to have to cast some shadows. So objects have to stack and stand in front of each other in the way of the light, casting some shadows. Remember the cube and the fact that your canvas is like an open space, and it's already 3D, so everything you draw in there will already be 3D. If you're curious about the colors that I chose, why I chose these specific skin tones, I've made so many videos about that already. So you can go through my channel and take a look. If you want to come by the critique hours, if you have anything for me to look at and critique, the critique hours are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. They're continuous, they don't stop. And you can send me your stuff on Facebook, on DeviantArt, and Twitter. I'll link everything below. Have a great day. I hope this was helpful. Bye bye.